So I want to have some anime discussions on this channel, because who doesn't love anime, am I right? And as anime lovers, I'm sure that we all have a favorite protagonist of some kind, whether it be Yusuke Urameshi, Kenshin Himura, Monkey D. Luffy, Light Yagami, Boruto's dad, Sensei, etc. But if there's one anime protagonist who is nobody's favorite, and I mean nobody's favorite, it would have to be Ichigo Kurosaki. This man right here is trash, of top tier levels. And in today's video, I'm going to explain why that is. So first up, no disrespect to Bleach. I love Bleach as much as the next guy, but I think the grand majority of us who do like Bleach can agree that Ichigo ain't shit. And as I'm further emphasizing my points here as to why that is, I want people to know that I will only be talking about Ichigo primarily from the time of his publication up until after the whole debacle with Aizen, and we'll only be talking about things like the Fullbringers or the Thousand Year Blood War, if necessary, to further emphasize a certain point that I have to make. Because for one, I know that we're not all manga readers, some of us only want to watch the anime, I get it, and Ichigo's character after Aizen is pretty much set in stone, so it's not like he becomes better as a character later on. But with that being said, let's get into the meat and potatoes of this video. So why is Ichigo Kurosaki such a bland anime protagonist? Well, first let's think about what a protagonist usually goes through when it comes to a story. You see, most of the time, main characters, primarily the main protagonist, will usually go through some sort of arc, a hero's journey. And if not that, then they'll usually inspire change to the world and people around them as opposed to them changing as a character. But Ichigo doesn't fall into either of these categories. He doesn't grow as a character, nor does he really inspire change in his realm. He's just kind of there to defeat the main enemy, and that's about it. And let me kind of explain here with a bit of backstory on my part. See, I never initially had any intention of watching Dragon Ball Super, right? And the reason was, for me, Dragon Ball ended at Z, I hated GT, and I was done. Because Dragon Ball Super looked like it was going to be Dragon Ball GT 2.0. However, I made an exception when I went with my friends to go see Dragon Ball Super Broly, the Broly rehash movie, for the show. And one of the things that I hate about the movie is that it's Broly's movie, but Broly didn't even feel like a character. He felt like a blunt instrument that was made for the purpose of fighting Goku and Vegeta. And while I wouldn't say Ichigo is as bad as Broly was depicted in that film, he is still very much a blunt instrument used to fight a major antagonist, with just the bare minimum given to him to say that he's a character in the story. Like, look at how Ichigo is in the first few episodes of Bleach. In the first few episodes, we find out that Ichigo is the type of character who will stand up for the little guy, be they a living person or a spirit. He has an astute sense of right and wrong, and he's willing to fight for those who can't or are not strong enough to fight for themselves, which are not bad traits to have in a protagonist. In fact, most anime protagonists have these traits. The problem is Ichigo is basically the same character from start to finish, which, let me just say, that is not always a bad thing. For example, Luffy from One Piece is essentially the same character from the time of his publication up until now. The difference between Luffy and Ichigo, however, is that Ichigo is a very boring character. Like, he feels almost like a side character in his own anime. For example, let's look at how Ichigo stacks up to major antagonists in Bleach. Most of the antagonists that Ichigo comes across are just obstacles keeping him from his goal. He has no real personal connection to the antagonist of any given arc, which again is not a horrible thing. I mean, after all, Goku doesn't have a real reason to kick Frieza's ass other than the fact that he wants to kick Frieza's ass. And again, a character like Luffy from One Piece doesn't have any real connection to the villains in that anime outside of maybe they did some sort of injustice to one of his friends. But both Luffy and Goku are likable and fun protagonists, and Ichigo is not. So we need a little more coming from him as opposed to the other two. Now, they tried to give Ichigo a bit more relevance when it came to Aizen, because Ichigo was the only one who hadn't seen Aizen Shikai and therefore can't fall under the influence of Kyoga Suigetsu, making Ichigo sorta kinda the chosen one type of protagonist. The problem is this gets screwed up, partially because of the writing and partially because of Ichigo himself. So let me explain. Immediately after Ichigo gets back from Wako Mundo, he instantly goes for Aizen, and he fails. trials, and we instantly find out the big gap between Aizen and Ichigo. Ichigo can't even touch this guy, meanwhile Aizen could have been killed Ichigo 10 times over. So all the other Soul Reapers plan to gang up on Aizen and try to provide Ichigo with an opportunity to kill him, which is a good plan up until we get to the point where Aizen does the whole switcheroo where they think they killed Aizen only to find out it was actually Hinamori. Now when first watching that scene, you guys, much like me, probably thought that was some real gangster shit right there. But when you really start to think about it, that's when the scene falls apart. Like, you don't even want to say the other characters were under the influence of Aizen's complete hypnosis. Ichigo is not, and therefore, I find a hard time believing that Ichigo would just stand by and watch this little girl essentially get bullied. And people tried to make the argument that Aizen probably made the switch sometime before Hitsugaya delivered the final blow. But that doesn't make sense because Ichigo's reaction doesn't match up. Now, I've looked up Ichigo's reaction to this a multitude of times in many different translations, each of which roughly translate to "what the hell are you all doing?" But if Aizen were to have made a switch somewhere in the last second, then he should say something more along the lines of "stop, you guys don't know what you're doing." So again, his reaction implies that they've been fighting Hinamori this whole time, which how they were doing that and how Hinamori was holding her own for so long makes no sense. But again, the writing is just really off. It's trying to be so clever that I hope you don't stare at the cracks in the wall. Like, even if you want to say Ichigo couldn't snap him out of it for whatever reason, he would still at the very least look for Aizen, because for all he knows, Aizen could literally stab him in the back. Again, when you really think about it, it's a very confusing scene, but moving on. The next thing I'm going to mention is a little more of Ichigo's fault, but it's also a writing issue as well, so take it as you will. And what I'm talking about here is when Yamamoto sacrifices himself and Ichigo sees an opportune moment to take Aizen down. And when he does, he slashes Aizen across the shoulder. Now we know that Aizen regenerates from this wound, but I feel like his regeneration would have had more gravitas if Ichigo had gone for his head, because by Ichigo going for his shoulder rather than his head, it squandered another opportunity. Now we know it would have been squandered either way, but say if like Aizen didn't regenerate from his shoulder injury, right? Ichigo still can't compete with this man. Like, he was caught off guard that one time but immediately recovered. And again, I understand that no matter what Ichigo did, it wouldn't have mattered. But at least if he had gone for the head, I can say that he had tried. But instead now, whenever I see Aizen recover from that injury, as opposed to making Aizen more formidable, I just look at it as rubbing salt into the wound of Ichigo not going for a killing blow. And speaking of Ichigo's tactics, let's talk about that, shall we? Because there are many times where I felt that Ichigo was just a tried and true dumbass. Like, for example, during his fight with Byakuya, when he first unleashed his Bankai, Ichigo had an opportune chance to kill this man. Like, he is literally a kiss away from cutting Byakuya's throat open. Now, I'm not saying that I was hoping that he had killed Byakuya because he's one of my favorite characters in the series, but if you have the advantage, then fucking use it. And he doesn't even take advantage of that. He only did that to show off. Another example was when he was fighting Ukiura. After his inner hollow ran amok and he found out what he did to Ukiura, as a hollow, he was like, okay, you need to cut off my arms and legs too because we need to make this fight fair. And I'm just like, bro, your first priority is getting Orihime the fuck out of Dodge, not having a dick measuring contest with Edgelord Supreme. Like, if you don't want to kill him, that's fine, but at least save the day first and then worry about fighting this guy.
Niggas think I'm fighting to save the day, but really, nigga, I just like to fight. What? I don't care about none of that shit.
Like, it's shit like that that makes me root for the other guy, because it's like he wants to accomplish his goals, but he wants to do them his way so badly to the point where common sense is just overridden. But moving on, let's talk about the number one thing that I have a problem with when it comes to Ichigo, and that is plot armor. Now, I know that every single story with every single protagonist is going to have some degree of plot armor, but even though they do, it's the story's job to make us, the audience, feel like they don't. So, for example, one of my favorite animes of all time is Rurouni Kenshin. And Kenshin, who's a swordsman, did not become a swordsman overnight. He's known to wield the sword for many years in the anime, so it makes sense that he's a badass swordsman. And Kenshin wins most of his fights in the anime. There are only 2 that he hasn't won in the entirety of the series. The first one was against Saito, an old rival of his, and the second one was against Makoto Shishio. Now, you can debate on whether or not Kenshin actually did or would have won those fights or not, but that's not what I'm trying to do here in this video. The point that I'm trying to make here is that when Kenshin does win these fights or puts up a really good fight like he did with Saito and Shishio, he does so with the skills that he's acquired over time, as well as the fact that he is an inept fighter. Like, he can adapt to certain situations mid-fight. So even though you know he's gonna survive some type of way, during the mix of these fights, you still like, oh shit, Kenshin might die right here. Now obviously they're not going to kill him off, but the anime does a good job of not showing off Kenshin's plot armor even though he has it too. Now when it comes to Bleach, specifically Ichigo over here, they practically put up a sign that says pay no attention to the bullshit, even though it is bullshit and it is quite frankly hard to ignore. So for example, during Ichigo's fight with Kenpachi should have won that one, but no, destiny dictates that Ichigo needs to be the winner of this fight. Now I understand they were trying to teach Ichigo a lesson about relying on his Zanpakuto more as a partner than a tool, but that still doesn't change the fact that Kenpachi should have won. Think of it this way, why couldn't Urahara teach Ichigo this lesson? Hell, Yoriichi could have done that in her cat form. So why wasn't this taught to Ichigo prior to this match? Because if Ichigo had learned it before his match with Kenpachi, then Kenpachi may have actually won the fight. Boy, ain't that convenient. Now when the inner hollow of Ichigo came out during the fight between him and Byakuya, I will give that a slight pass, since they did build up to it a little bit prior to that confrontation, and ass pulls aren't exactly anything new to Bleach when it comes to anime. So I'll give that a slight pass and turn the other cheek. What I will not turn a blind eye to, however, is when Ichigo's inner hollow comes back during the fight between him and Ukiura. Now you're probably thinking, but why though? Oh, well, it's actually quite fucking simple. It's because Ichigo gets too many last minute fucking saves. Seriously, this is the second time Ukiura has killed Ichigo, and both times manages to survive. And again, I understand that protagonists have plot armor embedded within them, but you can't be so brazen with that shit. You gotta be clever with it. And it's not just the fact that he survived Ukiura twice, it's that Ichigo survives so many injuries that would normally result in death to the point where I just don't care anymore. It's like the boy who cried wolf. But the number one thing that got me was when, during the time skip, I'm talking post Aizen here, during the 1,000-year Blood War, after terrorizing the Soul Society, your watch gets ready to leave, right? But then Ichigo shows up and he's like, your watch, I didn't hear no bell. Your watch is like, alright, bet. And this dude throws Ichigo into the ground and then proceeds to stab him in the throat with his sword. However, the blade does not penetrate. Why? Because apparently Ichigo is now part Quincy and has literal plot armor. I am not bullshitting you. I flipped over my coffee table. I mean, how in the fucking hell of fuck is Ichigo all of a sudden a Quincy? Ichigo has shown no signs of having any Quincy power whatsoever up until your watch tried to kill a bitch. And that's the thing with Ichigo, most of the fights that he wins don't feel deserved. Like, he only wins these fights because of a combination of the plot armor that I just mentioned and some sort of convenient power boost, like when he learned the final Getsuga Tensho to use against Aizen. In a combination of everything I just said so far, Ichigo just comes off as very generic. Like, he's the main protagonist for the sake of saying that the show has a main protagonist. And what's funny is you got at least 10 different dudes in this story that could have filled that role better. I'm just saying, Mr. Kurosaki, and I say this with the utmost disrespect, you are garbage. Know your fucking place, trash. But let me know what you guys think. Am I being too hard on Mr. Kurosaki? Do you guys see something that I personally don't see? Or is he just a terrible anime protagonist? As always, if you liked anything I had to say, don't forget to hit the like and click subscribe. Also, follow me on these social media platforms. You wouldn't want to commit treason now, would you?